I truly appreciate you coming tonight to see photographs of beautiful parts of the world, wonderful animals, and particularly the local people and others that are fighting to protect them. Yes. And another reason I'm happy to be here because I meet a number of people who do wonderful work for nature and environment in helping protect the jaguar and other wildlife. I've been fortunate. Well, the Reed Park Zoo has cooperated with the Wildlife Conservation Society. I've been on the staff of the Wildlife Conservation Society since 1956. And they've been very generous to me. Whenever I told them I want to go away for 2 years or 3 years to this country and study the wildlife, they said, go ahead, but you've got to find enough money. So I've been fortunate to get grants from a lot of organizations. So I'm, again, deeply grateful for enabling me and my wife, Kay, and our 2 sons to roam the world and look at wildlife. This is a picture of me in Brazil, in the great swamps of the Pantanal, with my pet white-lipped peccary. And pigs make the most wonderful pets because they're very intelligent, they're social, they attach themselves to, they're much like dogs. I went to the University of Alaska, and in 1952, I was asked to join a group to go to northern Alaska to see what's there. At that time, Alaska was not a state, and the whole northern area was basically unknown. You had this huge, beautiful area, native peoples living in villages along the coast, but the interior, there was nobody except the wildlife. And it was wonderful. On the right is Olaus Murray, who was the president of the Wilderness Society at the time, and his wife Marty. And they were wonderful naturalists. They wrote a number of books of their experiences with wildlife. I'm the second from the left, not gray yet. And on the far left is a professor at the University of Alaska, Bryna Kessel. But you see the beautiful mountains of the Brooks Range behind, and that's an area that was very little known at the time. It's a grizzly bear. And unlike the black bears that are here, they can be more short-tempered. So you back off when you see one, back off slowly. Don't turn your back. You look at them and go, oh, 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 which sends a signal that I'm leaving, leave me alone. And then you have the caribou. At that time, there were well over 100,000 migrating over the Arctic slope. One of the issues was to learn where they go, when, so they can be better protected because they wander so far. Here's a young male caribou. And they're, of course, heavily hunted by the local people because they have good meat. And in 1952, we came to a little tiny oil exploration camp that was drilling and dumping the waste oil under the tundra. I've been back several times to the area, and each time development is greater. Pipelines, roads, oil dumps, all over the place. And it's very sad to see basically untouched wilderness, the last untouched wilderness in the United States to be turned into an oil dump. And this fight has been going on now since the early 50s, and it hasn't stopped yet. And the current president has tried to help, but the oil companies have such social and monetary power, they can basically get what they want by buying off the local politicians. And here's an adaptable caribou wandering through an oil camp. There's still a few local people. This is from the Gwich'in Indian group. They have hunting rights in the area. So they hunt the moose and caribou and other things for meat. Well, the fight goes on. Like most conservation battles, they're not soon finished. So one has to continue to be involved. Then I was asked to go to East Africa, to the Congo, to study mountain gorillas. And I was delighted to do so. However, nothing much was known about them. All the written accounts were how ferocious they are. So my wife Kay and I went. Mountain gorillas live in cohesive groups. You carefully follow a group day after day, they accept you. They just look at this guy and says, well, he's no problem, and continue their life. Here's a young male eating some wild celery. They live in the Virunga volcanoes, which is on the border between the Congo, Uganda, and Rwanda. And it's a small area. So there are about 400 now. They were killed off till there were 200. Then they're better protected, and they've increased again. This is a hyrax. It's a small creature that lives there in the mountains that scream loudly every morning. On the left, you see my wife Kay sitting in a gorilla nest. And we usually climb trees a little ways because you can look down into the thick vegetation and see the social interactions between the gorillas and know down who does what to whom. The gorillas are so nice and adaptable. It got so, if they see me in a tree, they come sit at the bottom and stare at me. One female and baby climbed up in the tree with me and sat on the same branch. Wow. But it's like, gorillas are like people. They don't want to be stared at. Yeah. So if you want to see what's going on, you turn your head back and forth and act submissive. And they've been wonderful. Never had any problems with them, even with the big males who make a lot of display of beating the chest. And see, these are all close-up pictures of the gorillas. And the babies stay in a group. The males usually leave the group when they grow up and try to start their own group. The females usually stay, but sometimes switch from one group to another. Of course, any place on Earth these days has problems. Here's a tea plantation which intruded on the Virunga Volcano National Park. Trees were cut, tea was grown to make a profit, but it's very hard to control because of corruption virtually everywhere. But you have some very dedicated guards for the Virunga volcanoes. They know every gorilla individually by name. And gorillas are easy to identify, just like people. Their face, particularly the nose pattern and the wrinkles, is very distinctive. So you can learn all the animals in the group, and if one is suddenly missing, then you wonder what happened. Was it poached? People set up snares to catch them. And for a while, there was a good trade in gorilla hands for medical purposes. So anyway, here's one of the park guards, and the baby gorilla is coming up to inspect him. Tigers. Johns Hopkins University had an India project, so they asked me if I wanted to go and study tigers. So I said sure, because nothing was known about them, and they were just killed right and left by local people. They're not always easy. You can see one watching me. But I found they were just as adaptable as the gorillas in that they never on a kill, and they had seen me a number of times. I could sit nearby and not be threatening, and they continue eating, and I've never once been charged by a tiger, no matter how close I was, in 2 years. This is park warden for Kanha National Park, where I did most of the work. These are Baigar tribal people that also inhabit the park. Of course, one problem is if you kill a tiger and sell all the body parts, including the skin, to a dealer that then sells it to Chinese, you can get $4,000 or $5,000, which is a big income for a local person. Well, I was lucky. My wife Kay and our 2 very small sons came and worked with me in India. Here we're going on a local elephant to check for tigers. And some of the other animals that studied there was the axis deer, cheetal deer, which was one of the main prey species of tigers. And one of the main things a study like mine, of course, does is what do tigers prey on? What percent cattle, what percent deer, and so forth. And you do that by analyzing the droppings. So we always had a nice tray full of fresh droppings smelling up the house. And to see what they had eaten. Another species there was the Jaguar, kind of wild bison. Because the tigers there saw me so often, that area had maybe a dozen tigers. They saw me so often, they weren't afraid. I mean, I walk along, and here's the tigress crouched down to watch me pass, and I'd continue on as if I didn't see her, and things are just fine. Tigers have to eat. So in areas where they've killed off the wildlife, tigers start preying more on cattle. And here is a tiger strangling a domestic buffalo. You try to watch them in daytime and at night, just make sure you learn what they're doing. Now, one of the most wonderful places in the world for wildlife is the Serengeti. And my wife and family and boys lived there for 3.5 years to study. The main thing was for lion, but there's so much wildlife. The thing is, the work there had to be done mostly from the car, because lions live in groups with some unpredictable individuals. Just like humans, you never know when one might attack you. Here's our home in the Serengeti, and a giraffe feeding in the front yard. Here's the wildebeest migration. At the time when I worked there were nearly 2 million wildebeest. It's one of the most impressive wildlife sites anywhere. And you had many seabirds, you had elephants, which were heavily poached for the ivory. In fact, in the Serengeti, they were almost exterminated because there was such a good market for the ivory. Very interesting animal is the hunting dog, a gola. They live in tight family groups, and they hunt together, and they hunt in a very systematic way, encircling their prey and so forth. They have puppies in dens, and then puppies come out, and they're wonderful to watch. My wife and our 2 boys, and there was a lioness who had no milk, and she had a baby, and it was almost starved to death, and she carried it around and then dropped it, and I took it home, and we revived it, and it became a family companion. Here's our son playing with a lion. It's a little bit bigger. And I go out every day near the Lion Pride, and with local help, we watched some Lion Prides day and night for over 20 days to find out exactly what they're doing, how far they're traveling, what they're eating, and so forth. Because in any project, you need the data to make solid recommendation on what to do to protect them. Here, 4 male lions having pulled down a big buffalo. And that's a dangerous job for a lion. Oh, the cheetah, beautiful, elegant cat, but it's slow in the hierarchy of predators there. Here, this cheetah has just killed a Thompson's gazelle, and the Thompson's gazelle made a dying bleat, which the lion heard, and he comes rushing up to get a free meal. And the cheetahs have large home ranges. It can be 1,000 or more square miles. So it's difficult to keep track of them, but I knew all the cheetahs in that area individually by their spot pattern. The thing is, the lions, their groups, have a nice social system in that they scent mark the trees, they scent mark the ground by scraping it, and any lions that come in know that the area is occupied and usually know by whom, just by the smell. A lot of these animals, predators and others, they have a world of smell so good at identifying things that we can't begin to do it. Yeah. Then, well, Wildlife Fund asked me to go look at giant pandas. And that was a very interesting project in that it was right after the Cultural Revolution. They just opened up China to foreigners. And in the remote area of Sichuan province where the pandas are, the local people had never seen a foreigner. So if I walk near a village, I'm followed by a group like in this room here, just watching me closely and looking at anything I say and do. Like the gorillas, the pandas, I followed some of them day after day. They got used to you, and I could lie down for the night. I can put my sleeping bag near them and stay near them to see what they're doing. And it's rugged terrain. And here's a historical. You can see they had a large range, and the blue areas are where they are today. That is simply because they've been killed off for the hides and for meat and for all sorts of things. And you can see one problem. This is the Wolong National Park, where I did a lot of work, but the hillsides have been logged off. But Chinese population in the region is spreading fast, and more forest goes, and it's harder and harder on the panda. And the government is working hard to protect the panda from poaching and so forth, but they've got to have the habitat, and they have to have connected habitat, not just 5 animals in a little tiny forest patch. This is winter fun of studying pandas. This is our home. My wife Kay getting firewood to keep it warm. And you can see the dense bamboo surrounding the tent. So it's not always easy to see the pandas. Other species there is the takin. It's a cow-like animal. It's heavily hunted by the local people because there's a lot of meat. And a golden monkey. Again, a lot of these animals sort of got used to seeing me around, and so they didn't flee when they saw me. The local government wanted me to put some radios on the pandas so they can get more information. So pandas are known to eat bamboo as a main diet. In fact, they do eat about 30 pounds a day. But they love meat if they can get it. And so we used the live traps we built and baited them with meat. Besides, meat smells good, and you can smell it from a distance. And we had a good team of Chinese, and here they're radio tracking a collared panda. And one panda got so used to being tracked that she tracked us, smelled the good food in our cabin, and moved in. And here you see our staff sitting on one end while she is finding some food and enjoying herself. And she was not aggressive, but didn't like us to come closer. So she ate on one end of the hut, we sit on the other end. Finally, the government transferred her to another part of the park because she became a tourist attraction, and you didn't want lines of tourists coming up in the reserve. But it's lovely. You come home from a hard day in the field and couldn't find much, and there looking out the window of your tent is a panda. Their main food still is bamboo shoots, which are quite nutritious in protein and fluid. But the problem with bamboo is, at intervals, it mass flowers and dies. And that's, you see here, the bamboo, it's all dead stems. So the panda has to move elsewhere, usually up or downhill because there are other species. But if there aren't other species, they have to move farther away, and if not, they'll starve. And back in the 70s, a number of them starved in the area. Here we have a Christmas celebration with good food and wine in our hut. Yeah, here's a panda wandering through bamboo. There was a very rewarding study, but then in 1985, the government asked me to move to Tibet to do a study of the Tibetan wildlife, so I did that. Now you have this huge plateau, most of it uninhabited, and a lot of wildlife still, at least used to have. So you can see one of the animals I studied was the wild yak. Obviously the ones that were caught as cubs and then domesticated. So you have all these domesticated yaks. But these are 4 wild bulls. And you have to be a little careful, because if they get annoyed, they'll charge. And you have a beautiful lynx. The thing is, that area is so remote that most animals have never seen a person. So this lynx let me stand right there, less than 10 feet away, and photograph it. At night, the wolves came around camp, passed by the tent, not afraid. Here, it's got the remains of a Tibetan antelope. But I crawled within a few feet of the wolf, and he didn't run away. Here's a Tibetan boy with a hat made of fox skin and a Tibetan antelope. They have the unfortunate thing of having the finest wool in the world. Oh, no. And it's a beautiful male and a female. And one of my tasks was to study their migrations, because they move a long way across the Tibetan plateau. Here are females and a baby suckling. And that's their habitat. In the foreground, you see the hillside is covered with brown dots, which are the Tibetan antelope. It's beautiful terrain, but it's changing fast with climate change. A lot of that snow and glaciers is now gone. Because I went into this area every year for 40 years. A local hunter with Tibetan antelope. The male with the long horns. The horns bring a good market on the medicine market. Good pie. The meat is sold or eaten. And then the wool is pulled out. And usually, the wool is smuggled to India and Nepal, where you have whole industries weaving that fine wool into shawls. And beautiful, they're called chatouche shawls. A beautiful shawl can sell for $5,000 to a foreigner. So the poor antelope decreased from estimate of 300,000 to about 100,000 within 20 years because of poaching. And now there's better protection again. So I hope, are increasing. Working in that area, I depended on the hospitality of the local Tibetan herdsmen, and they were wonderful. They're so hospitable. And they live in remote areas in tents woven of yak hair. Then there are more modern ones that have made good money from Tibetan antelope wool, and they build themselves a little mud hut and buy themselves a motorcycle. And motorcycles are very useful, because you can roar across country and chase a Tibetan antelope and club it to death without having to shoot it. You have herds of wild asses. But the government has been dividing the rangelands into private properties. So as soon as something you say belongs to you, you want to keep others out. So a lot of big barbed wire fences have been built across the northern plains, and animals don't know that. Here's a poor wild ass that tried to jump it and has killed itself. Here's a local herdsman who's become a teacher on behalf of conservation. He goes around to the villages and says, protect it, it's our heritage, and so forth. It's a kind of local involvement that you need everywhere. The Buddhist idea is be kind to all living beings. That is the true religion. And so they are all protected. They have holy mountains near their monasteries where nobody is allowed to hunt. And if outsiders come in, the monks chase them out. And they have big ceremonies where they throw little printed paper prayers into the wind to send their message of being kind to animals. I decided nobody was working on jaguars. Nothing much was known about them. But I knew the Chinese were buying a lot of bodies for medicine. I wanted to do a project on jaguars to draw attention and get some information. So I visited various South American countries, and Beth Wald is here. Raise your hand, Beth. And she came along to help with several countries because she speaks fluent Spanish. Finally, we decided to do a project in Brazil in the Pantanal, which is in the northeastern corner. And the Pantanal is the world's biggest wetland. It's over 40,000 square miles. It had a lot of jaguars, and we decided to set up the study there. The area is cut by a lot of rivers, and we checked along the rivers for jaguars. A lot of the area of Pantanal are private ranches. There are over 2 million cattle in the Pantanal. The ranches, jaguars kill cattle, so then you naturally kill the jaguar. And then the Chinese heard about it and came and encouraged the killing so they could get all the body parts for medicine. But the important thing was tourists discovered the jaguars, and tourists came down in boats along the rivers, and they wanted to see jaguars and photograph them. When the ranchers saw that they could make money from the tourists to show them jaguars and build rest houses where the tourists could stay and make even more money, suddenly they became very pro-jaguar and protect them. And that's a good lesson for every place that can show something that tourists really want, whether it's tigers or jaguars or whatever. So in that particular area, at least, jaguars were, the ranchers protected them, and they increased very well. That's the Pantanal, and most of the area is flooded during the rainy season. So it's not always easy to get around. And I worked with local people to push us by boat around the swamps looking to see what's there. And one rancher doesn't live there. He lives in town. So he was generously let my family and me move into that house while I did the research. So our 2 sons now are quite big, and our pig is following us. Oh, that's my wife Kay feeding our white-lipped peccary. Pigs are so sociable. I mean, really. And I travel the rivers to look for jaguars and so forth. Our two boys are fishing. Oh, we also have some anacondas there. And a local ranch woman with a pet macaw. Well, there are also squatters that simply move into an area and grab a piece of land and build a hut and do local hunting. And the government doesn't want to get involved in big hassles. An endless number of cattle, and look at how poor condition they are. Yeah. Cattle going to market up and down the river. The ranch where we studied was about 50 square miles right on the Bolivian border. And the Paraguay River runs there. And this was a major smuggling route for cocaine and other drugs. Here, cattle are starving. There are too many for the land. And when it's flooded, they can't go anywhere, and the ranchers don't do anything. And here's a cowhand ready to shoot a jaguar anytime he sees one. Because my study area was next to a major drug smuggling route, the manager got involved in the drug business, and the last thing he needed was an American hanging out. And so he ordered all the jaguars on the ranch shot. I lost the male and 3 females and 2 big cubs. In the Curacao Ranch where I studied the jaguars, there were 64 species of mammals, of which 1/3 was bats. So it's a good variety of wildlife. And then, of course, you have all the birds. And you have puma. And you have turkey vultures. And a 3-banded armadillo. Oh, capybara, the world's largest rodent, who can get to be 100 pounds. And that's a bird called cattle tyrant sitting on it, because they land on cattle and poke around all over. They eat insects and anything else they can find in the skin. But the capybara is one of the jaguar's main foods. And so this is a nice spot for a jaguar. Look at that. And we have giant anteaters there. And marsh deer. And you have alligators, also caiman, Paraguayan caiman. And I did quite a bit of work on them. This is a female guarding her nest. She's lying on a big pile of leaf litter. And near the bottom, there are about 30 eggs. And when they hatch, she removes some of the leaf litter and very gently picks up an egg and cracks it so the young can come out easier. Wow. And then when everybody's out, they all go as a group into the river. Nice. But most nests get destroyed by foxes and coatimundis. They, of course, know what the nest is, so they find it, they dig up the eggs and eat them. There's a baby hatching. And during the dry season, the big swamplands are reduced to various pools and all the alligators pile into them. And here's one of these pools at night, alligator eyes shining.
Oh, neat. Oh, my goodness.
Here is my principal Brazilian co-worker, Peter Crawshaw. He had just caught a caiman with a loop snare so we could tag it and get some idea of the movement. We put the tag in the scale in the tail. They like to lie on the riverbank. And here's my son Eric making a plaster cast of Jaguar tracks. You can see the map, the area we worked in. Brazil found it could, government found it could make thousands of dollars by getting foreign hunters in to shoot jaguars. So they got permission, and the easy way to shoot a jaguar is you hire a couple local guys and a pack of dogs. And the dogs can track the jaguar and chase it up a tree. Here I am with Peter Crawshaw and a couple local guys. We're putting a radio on a jaguar to see how far they travel. And you don't have big ranges if there's enough to eat, maybe 20 square miles. But in all these areas, whether you're talking of tigers or jaguars, one male usually has in his range 2 or 3 females, which he protects. Oh, this is a jaguar looking out at us from a rotting boat. In some areas, they're black jaguars, and this one was in the Amazon, which I came across. But look at all black with glowing eyes. This was in northern Argentina on the ranch. The capybaras were quite tame. So I lie down, and here they are. This is the original jaguar painting by the animal artist named Bob Kuhn, who does beautiful wildlife work. And he gave it to me. Thank you.